Hello everyone, welcome to this new video on Matplotlib series. My name is Tanya and today in this video we will learn how we can install Matplotlib in our system. And for the current instance, I will show you how to install Matplotlib on Windows 10. So don't worry if you are using some other operating system. We have an article related to this topic in which we have covered the installation of Matplotlib on different operating system. The link of that article will be available in the description box. So let's get started. First of all, we have to install Python in our system. If you have not installed Python in your system till now, don't worry, we have a video related to installation of a Python on Windows and other operating system also. The link of these video will be also available in the description box. Basically, there are two ways to install Matplotlib on Windows 10. The first one is installation of a Matplotlib by creating a virtual environment, and the next is installation of a Matplotlib using a pip command. So now, firstly we will discuss the first way to install Matplotlib, that is by creating a virtual environment. As Matplotlib is Python based framework, so it is a Python module. These are the steps used to install Matplotlib by creating a virtual environment. Firstly, we have to install Python in our system. If you have already installed, then it's good, and if you don't, pause this video and install the Python first. After installing Python, the next important step is the creation of a virtual environment. So, next we have to understand how we can create a virtual environment and activate it. And in the last, we will use this virtual environment for the installation of a Matplotlib. Now, let's understand how we can create a virtual environment. For this, I will open a command prompt. Now I will move to the location where I want to create a virtual environment. So I want to create it in a E directory. So here I type E. Now I will move to the location where I want to create an environment. We can easily create a virtual environment by using a Python only. So there is a by default module in Python whose name is venv. So we can use it to create a virtual environment. For this, we have to execute a command, and the command is already available in the article. You can easily move to the article from the given link in the description box. So once you open the link available in the description box, the article will look something like this. And from the table of content, we have to move how to install Matplotlib in Windows 10. So here's the table of content. You can easily move where you want to. And from this, we have to copy this command, which is python -m venv, then the directory path, or we can say it the environment name. So let's copy it. So there we are using the venv Python module to create a virtual environment, and we have to provide the name of a virtual environment after this. So I am creating the virtual environment with the name mypython-venv. So here I write the name of my virtual environment. So once the command executed successfully, we can easily check whether the virtual environment is created or not. For this, we have to use the dir command, or we can say that the directory command. Now here you see that the file exists, or we can say that the environment exists with the name mypython-env. So which I created earlier. Now let's understand how we can activate it. Now to activate a virtual environment, we have to run activate.bat file, and this file is available in the script directory within our virtual environment. For this, we have to simply write a command which is firstly, we have to write the name of our virtual environment which we created earlier. So my virtual environment name is my python -env. Then we have to use the slash. Then I write the scripts. Then I write activate.bat. You can easily get this command from the article also. After writing a command successfully, hit the enter key. So here you see that the name is appearing corresponding to our command prompt, which means that our virtual environment will be activated successfully. Now we can easily install Matplotlib using a pip module. For this, run the following command, which is python -m pip install matplotlib. So after writing a command, once again hit enter key. This command will install the latest release of the Matplotlib. So as you see, the installation process is start. So wait for some time till the installation completed. It takes some times to install, so wait till it install completely. So now you see that the Matplotlib is successfully installed. Till now, we have learned how to install Matplotlib by creating a virtual environment. Now we will learn the next step or the next way to install a Matplotlib. So the next way is the installation of a Matplotlib using a pip command. For this, we have to follow some steps. The steps is like that. Firstly, we have to install Python. Then we have to install a pip. And then we have to install a Matplotlib. Now let's see the execution. First open the command prompt. Then to check whether the Python is installed successfully or not, check the Python version by using the command python space -version. If you get the version successfully, it means that the Python is installed. Now we need to install pip. So in some system, the pip module is already installed by default and in some not. To check whether the pip is installed or not, we have to check its version also. For this, we have to write this command, which is python space -m space pip space -version. Then hit enter. So here you see that we also get the version of a pip. It means the pip is also installed. So after this, we install the Matplotlib module. For this, we have to write the command python space -m space pip space install space Matplotlib. So here you see that the installation started. So it takes some time to install. So here you see that the Matplotlib is successfully installed. It only gives the warning, which is that the pip is not in upgraded version. If you want to upgrade it, you can use this command to upgrade the pip. Otherwise, there is no issue in Matplotlib installation. And today we learn what is Matplotlib inline. So, in this video, we will learn the following topics. Firstly, we discuss about magic function. Then we see different magic function available in Matplotlib. After this, we discuss inline in Matplotlib, and then we will learn how to use this inline in Jupyter Notebook. So let's start with the first topic, that is magic functions. So Interactive Python provides a collection of several predefined functions that called a magic function. And these magic functions can be used and callable by a command line style syntax. So basically there are two types of a magic function. One is line oriented, another one is cell oriented. So let's discuss each one by one. Firstly, start with line oriented magic function. We can also call it as a line magic. These functions start with the percentage sign followed by an argument in the rest of the line without any quotation or a parenthesis. We can say that as same as an OS command line calling of a function. And these function return some result. Hence can be stored by writing it on right hand side of an assignment statement. And some of the example of line oriented magic functions are percentialize, percent auto weight, percent color, percent conda, and percent matplotlib, and many other also. Now understand what is cell oriented magic function. We can also call it as a cell magics. It starts with double percentage sign, and these functions are followed by the argument in the whole cell, that is in the rest of the line, and also lines below it in the separate argument. And some of the cell magic functions are double percent bash, double percent HTML, or double percent JavaScript, and many other also. So our main agenda is to talk about percent matplotlib magic function. So let's talk about it. Basically, this function sets up the Matplotlib to work interactively. It lets you to activate the Matplotlib interactive support anywhere in the interactive Python, which we can also say IPython session. Example of IPython is Jupyter Notebook. And the syntax to call this function is percentage matplotlib GUI. And here GUI is the name of Matplotlib backend to be enabled by calling the function. And we can provide backend as inline, notebook, Qt, Qt4, Qt5, TK, PDF, and many other also. So if you want to see the list of available Matplotlib backends, I show you how you can see it. So the command is percentage matplotlib space hyphen L, and then press on run key, and you can see the available backends in Matplotlib are printed here. Or you can also check in another way. The command is percent matplotlib space hyphen hyphen list, and now run this. You can see that it also shows the same one. Now from here you see that it also provides us a inline backend. So in the next topic we discuss about this. So you can use the magic function percent matplotlib inline to enable the inline plotting, where the plots and the graphs will be displayed just below the cell where you plot the commands. Basically it provides interactivity with the backend and in the front end like the Jupyter notebook, and it also provides us another feature where the plotting commands below the output cell of the previous plot will not affect the previous plot, which I mean it separates the different plots. For example, if I want to change the color of the plot by using the color map, it will not affect the previous plot. Now let's learn how to use this inline function in Jupyter Notebook. So here is the example. I explain you this example line by line. So firstly I import the Matplotlib library with pyplot module. Then I import the NumPy library as NP. After this I write the percentage matplotlib inline before starting the plotting commands to activate the matplotlib inline. After this I define the data coordinates. Firstly I define x by using a range function, Then I define y1, y2, y3 by using sine, cos and tan function of numpy. Then I set the new figure size by using the figure function. After this, I add a title to the plot by using the title function, and I set its font size to 18. After that, I call the plot function 3 times to plot between different data coordinates which I defined above. First line is plotted between x and y1, the another one is between x and y2, and the third one is between x and y3. And I also specify some styles to these line like line width, and I also add a label to these line. After this, I plot vertical and horizontal line and specify its color to black, and then I add labels at the x-axis and the y-axis and also set its font size to 15. And in last, I call the ligand function to add ligand to the plot, and I also set its font size to the 15. Now I execute this program and you will see the plot. Here you can see how it's look. So I want to clear something. If you are using the current version of IPython notebook and the Jupyter notebook, it is not necessary to use the percentage matplotlib inline function which we are discussing, as whether you call the matplotlib show function or not, the graph output will display in any case. I will show you if I erase this function what will happen. Is graph is visible or not. Now I erase this and now I execute this program again. See, the plots shows without any error. And today we will learn Matplotlib plot align. Recently we got the requirement of creating a video on how to plot a line chart using a Matplotlib. So today in this video we will learn the following concept with its execution. First, we will understand what is line chart. Then we will learn how to change the style of a line chart. We will also learn to change the thickness of a line chart. We will also learn to change the color of a line chart. And at the end, we will learn to plot a line between 2 points. Also, we will understand what is linear function and how to plot a linear function. Then we will learn to plot a point on a line graph. Next, we will learn to plot a straight line on a scatter graph. We will also learn to plot a line graph from a data frame. And at the end, we will learn to plot a line in 3 dimensions. For more videos like this one, subscribe our YouTube channel. We already have a detailed article related to this video, and the link of that article will be available in the description box. So without any delay, let's start with the first topic, that is Matplotlib plot line chart. Firstly, we will understand what is line chart. Line chart visualize the relationship between two quantities on x-axis and y-axis on the xy Cartesian plane. You can create a line chart in Python by using the pyplot submodule in the Matplotlib library. Pyplot provides a collection of related functions for a variety of plot. Next, we learn to import pyplot submodule. The following is the syntax to import the Matplotlib library with pyplot submodule. That is, import matplotlib pyplot as plt. Here, the plt is the short name for the pyplot. You can use any other name in place of plt. Now let's see the execution of a line chart. For this, open your Jupyter notebook. You can also use the editor of your choice. Now I copy paste the code from the article and explain you line by line. Now I am copying it and here I paste it, and the link of that article will be available in the description box. Now I explain a code by highlighting the lines. So Firstly, I import the Matplotlib library with pyplot module. Next, we define x and y data coordinates. To plot a simple line chart, we use plot function of pyplot module and pass the coordinates to it. And in last, we use the show function to display the plot. Now, I click on this arrow to execute this code. It takes some time, so wait for the output and the code will successfully execute it, and here you see the output of a simple line chart. Now we move to our next topic, that is Matplotlib plot a line style. You can change the line style in a line chart using a Matplotlib, and for this you need to specify the parameter line style in the plot function. These are the line styles available in the Python. You can choose as per your choice. You can either specify the name of the line style or its symbols enclosed in the quotation mark. Now let's see the example. Once again, I copy the code from the article and paste it in a notebook and then execute it. So I am copying it. Now I explain the code line by line. Firstly, we import the Matplotlib with pyplot module. Next, we define x and y data coordinate. Next, I use the plot function to plot a simple line chart with solid line style. Next, I plot a line with a dashed line style. So here I pass a line style as a parameter and specify it to dashed. Similarly, by using a plot function, I plot a line with dotted line style, and hence here I specify the symbol of a line style. To plot a line with dash dotted line style, we pass the dotted symbol to a plot function. And to display all the plots, we call the show function each time. Now I execute this code and here's the output. You can see these graphs with different line style. Next we move to the topic, that is Matplotlib plot a line thickness. You can change the line thickness in a line chart using a Matplotlib. For this you need to specify the parameter line width to the plot function. Now let's see an example. Here I copy this code and now I explain it. So firstly we import the Matplotlib with pyplot package. Next we define the data coordinates, or we can say the x and y values, and then we call the plot function of a pyplot module and pass line width parameter to it and set its value to 7. Next we set the line width to 3, and in last we use the show function to display all the plot. Now I execute this code and here's the output. You can see the graph with line width 3 and the line width 7 also. Now we move to the next topic, that is Matplotlib plot a line color. You can change the line color in a line chart using a Matplotlib. For this we have to pass the color parameter in the plot function. There are variety of colors available in the Python. You can choose as per your choice. You can either specify the name of a color or its symbol or its hexa code closed in the quotation mark. Let's see an example. Now I explain this code. Firstly, we import the Matplotlib package. Next, we define the data here in the x and y form. Next, we use the plot function to plot a line chart, and to change the color of the line, we specify the color parameter and set it to green. And in this case, we will use the color symbol as a parameter and specify it to red color. And in this case, I specify the color as a neon purple by using the hexadecimal code, and the show function is called to plot a chart, and I execute it, and here you see the output. Now we will move to the next topic, that is plot a line between 2 points. We can plot a line between 2 points in Matplotlib by specifying the 2 points in the x-axis and y-axis value list. Now we see an example. Now I am copying this code from the article and pasting in a Jupyter notebook. Now I explain you code line by line. So here we import the Matplotlib package. Next we define data coordinate. So here I specify only 2 points. So that's why we take x with 2 points only and the y values with 2 points only. Now I use the plot function to plot a line between 7 and 8 and 42 and 44, and here we also specify the line width and the color of the line to green. Then we use the show function to display the output. We can also specify the 2 points in the plot function. So here I specify these points in the plot module, or we can say that in the plot function. Here I use the plot function to plot a simple line chart between 2 points, that is 2 and 5 and 6 and 10, and I also specify the color of a line to red and the line width to 5, and to display the plot I use the show function. And now I execute this code and you will see the example. It creates a line between 2 points. If you don't know how to install Jupyter Notebook and how to set up Matplotlib, don't worry. Watch our video what is Matplotlib and how we use it in Python. The link of that video will be available in the description box. So let's start with the topic, that is Matplotlib plot linear function. Firstly, we will discuss linear function. A linear function represents a straight line on the graph. You can use the slope intercept form of the line, that is y equals to m into x plus c. Here x and y are the x-axis and the y-axis, and m is the slope of a line and c is the x-intercept of the line. So let's see an example. I copy this code from the article. If someone does not know how to install NumPy in Jupyter Notebook, I will tell you, then I explain this code line by line. So firstly I add one cell, and now I write the syntax to install NumPy, that is pip install NumPy, and click on this arrow to run this cell, and NumPy will successfully install. In my system it is already installed. Now I explain you this code by highlighting the line. So firstly we import the Matplotlib library with pyplot submodule. Next we import the NumPy library. Then we define the x values using a range function of NumPy. Next we define slope and intercept parameters. Then we calculate the value for y by using the slope, intercept and x values. Then to plot a line created by a linear function, we use a plot function. We also define the label in the plot function by using the label parameter, and also set the line width to 2. Next, by using a title function, we add a title to a plot. To add a label at x-axis, we use the xLabel function, and to add a label at a y-axis, we use the ylabel function. And to show the ligand on the plot, we use the ligand function, and to display the plot, we call the show function. And now I execute this code, and here you see the output, a line with a linear function line with this title. This is y-axis label, this is x-axis label, and this is the ligand. Now we will move to the next topic, that is Matplotlib plot point on a line graph. To add a point on the line graph in Matplotlib, we add the marker parameter in the plot function. So let's see an example with an explanation. This example is also available in the article. So now I explain it. Firstly, import the Matplotlib with pyplot module. Next, we define x and y axis data coordinates. To plot a point on a line chart, we use plot function with marker parameter, or you can also pass the symbol of the marker to the plot function. Next, I use the show function to display the plot, and now I execute this code. Here is the output with line on a graph with points. Now we will move to the next topic, that is scatter plot straight line. To plot a straight line on a scatter plot in Matplotlib, we use a function ploifit in NumPy module of Python, which is generally least square polynomial fit function, and in your case I take a degree 1. So now let's see an example. Here I copy the code from the article and paste it in a Jupyter notebook. Now I explain the code line by line. We import Matplotlib package. Next we import NumPy package. Then we define x and y of data points by using an array function. Then we create a scatter graph by using a scatter function. Here I also pass marker as a parameter and set it to a star. And to generate a best fit line, we call polyfit function, and to plot a straight line, we use the x value and the generated parameter. So now to display the plot, we call the show method. Now I execute this code, and here is the output of scatter plot with straight line. Now we will move to the next topic, that is plot line graph from data frame. To plot the graph from the data frame by using a plot function of a pyplot module, or by using the plot function of a data frame. Now let's see an example. You can similarly install pandas as NumPy if you don't install till now. Now I explain you the code. I divide the code into parts. So firstly I import the pandas library. Next we define the list of a data frame. First one is a country and next one is the population density. So next we create the pandas data frame by using a data frame function. Then we print the data frame by passing the name of the data frame which we created at df pop density. Now I execute this code, and here is our data frame. Now I explain you second part of the code. Firstly I import the Matplotlib library with pyplot submodule. To set the figure size, we call the figure method and pass a fixed size parameter to it and set its width to 9 and height to 5. Then I use the title parameter to a function to add a title to a plot. Next, we use the plot function of pyplot module to plot a line in the data frame, or we can say the graph. So we can also use the data frame function instead of the plot function. Next, I use the xtick function to rotate the x-axis tick. So I pass the rotation parameter to it. To set the x labels, or we labels at the x-axis, we call the x label function, and to set label at the y-axis, we call the y label function, and to visualize the plot, we call the show function. Now I execute this code, and here is the output. You can see that the x labels, or we can say that the x ticks are rotated at 60 degree, because we use the xtick function with rotation parameter and set it to 60. Now we will move to the last topic, that is plot line in 3D. To plot a line plot in 3D, we have to import mplot3d from module mpl toolkits. So let's see an example. First, we import the Matplotlib library, then we import the NumPy library, and then we import the library which is used to plot 3D functions. And here we set the projection of a plot to 3D by using the axis function with the projection parameter, and I set it to the 3D. Next, we define the data coordinate x, y, and z. Here we also use the z data because we plot a 3D graph, and 3D graph has 3 axes, and we define z by using a line space function of numpy, and to plot a line we call plot function, and to add a title to a plot we call a title function, and to display the plot we use the show method. And here I execute this code, and here is the output. You clearly see from the output the graph has 3 axes, which is x, y, and z. Today we will learn to plot multiple line graphs. Recently we got the requirement of creating a video on how to plot multiple line chart using a matplotlib. So today in this video we will learn the following concept with the example and their execution. First, we will learn to plot multiple lines on a same graph. Next, we will learn to plot multiple lines of a different color. Then we will learn to plot multiple lines with ligand. We will also learn to plot multiple lines from array. Next, we will learn to plot multiple lines from a data frame. We will learn to plot multiple lines using for loop. Then we will learn to plot multiple lines with different y-axis. Next, we will learn to plot multiple lines in three-dimensional graph. Next, we will learn to plot multiple lines with same color. We will also learn to plot multiple lines with title. We will learn to plot multiple lines in a subplot. We will also learn to plot multiple lines with different length, and we will also learn to plot multiple lines using Seaborn library, and in the last we will learn to plot multiple lines from CSV file. We already have a detailed article related to this video, and the link of that article will be available in the description box. And we already have a video related to Matplotlib plotting a simple line chart. If you have not watched till now, go and watch, and the link of the video is given in the description box. And for more videos, subscribe to our YouTube channel. So let's start with first topic, that is plot multiple lines on same graph. In Matplotlib, you can plot multiple lines on the same graph or a chart. To plot multiple lines, we call a plot function of a pyplot module twice with different data points. So let's see an example. Here I am using the Jupyter notebook for execution of the code. I copy this code from the article. Now I explain you line by line. Firstly, we import the Matplotlib library with pyplot submodule. Next, we define data values. Then we plot a first line. We call a plot function with x and y data values. Once again, we call the plot function with another values x and z. And in last, we call the show function to display plot with multiple lines on the same graph. Now I execute this example and here is the output. Now we will move to the next topic, that is plot multiple lines of a different color. You can specify the color of the line in the chart in Matplotlib. You can specify the color parameter as a positional argument or by keyword argument. Like positional argument means we can specify the color name in short form. For example, R for red, or with keyword argument means we say that we specify color as a parameter and pass color symbol or a color name or a hexa code to it. Now let's see an example with its execution. Now I copy this example from the article and here I paste. Now I explain you the code. Firstly, import Matplotlib library with pyplot. Next, define data values in XYZ form. Then I create a first line by calling the plot function. Here I pass xy as a data point for plotting, and to set it color I pass the short symbol of a color, which is C. Once again I call a plot function with x and z data point and color symbol y, which means yellow, to plot another line. And in last I call the show function to display the plot. Now I execute this code and here is the output of multiple line plot with different colors. Now we will move to next topic, that is multiple lines with ligand. You can add ligand to a graph for differentiating multiple lines in the graph by adding the parameter label in the plot function. Label parameters specify the name given to the line for its identity. Let's see an example. Now I explain this code. First, import Matplotlib library. Next, we define data values x, y, z. Then call the plot function to plot first line, and here I also pass label parameter and set it to line y. Once again, I call the plot function to plot another line and also pass label parameter to it. After plotting lines and before displaying the graph, I call a ligand function to display it on the graph. And in last, call the show function to display the plot. Now I execute this code and here is the output with ligand. Now we will move to next topic, that is plot multiple lines from array. In Matplotlib you can plot multiple lines from the data provided by an array. You can do it by specifying the different columns of the array as the x, y axis parameter. So let's see an example. So I divide the code in two parts. Firstly, import the NumPy library. Then I create an array using an array function of NumPy package. Here we pass 2D list of an array. Then we print the array with its shape and type. Now I execute this part and here's the output. In next part, we import the Matplotlib library. Then we plot multiple lines using a plot function, and we have select columns by slicing the array. Next we call the ligand function to add a ligand to the plot, and to display the plot we call the show function. Now I execute this code and here is the output. Now we will move to the next topic, that is plot multiple lines from data frame. You can plot multiple lines from the data provided by a data frame. You can do it by specifying the different columns of data frame as the x and y axis parameter. So now let's see an example. Firstly, we import pandas and numpy library for data preparation. Then we create data frame by using a data frame function of pandas library. Next, we rename the column as X, Y, Z. Then we print this data frame with its shape and type. Now I execute this code and here you see the data frame. Now to plot multiple lines, we import Matplotlib pyplot package. Next we call the plot function with x and y XYZ data coordinates, and I also specify the label parameter to specify the line identity, or we can say that the line name, and we also pass a color parameter to the plot function to change the color of the line. Next I call the ligand method to add a ligand to a plot, and in last I call the show method to display the plot. Now I execute this code and here is the output of multiple lines from data frame. Now we will move to the next topic, that is plot multiple lines from using a for loop. Sometimes to plot a lines using a plot function become time consuming process. So in such cases you can use a for loop to plot multiple lines by using the plot function only once inside the loop, where x and y axis parameter are not fixed and dependent on the loop. So now let's see an example. Firstly, I import the pandas and numpy library. Then I create a data frame with 4 columns and 7 rows using a data frame function of pandas library. Then we rename the columns as X, Y, Z and P, and in last I print the shape of the data frame, type of the data frame and data frame also. Now I execute this part of the code and here is the output. Now we move to the next part of the code. Here I import the Matplotlib library. Then I use the loop to counter iterate over the column list of the data frame, and 3 lines are plotted on the graph representing the relationship between the first column with other 3 columns of the data frame. I also call the ligand function to add a ligand to a plot, and in last I call the show function to display the plot. Now I execute this code and here is the output. Now we will move to the next topic, that is plot multiple lines in 3D. So in Matplotlib we can plot multiple lines in 3 dimensions using Matplotlib submodule mplot3d. So let's see an example. Here I import Matplotlib pyplot library, numpy library and Matplotlib mplot3d submodule from the MPL toolkit, an external toolkit for Matplotlib in Python used to plot multi-vectors of a geometric algebra. Next, I set the projection to 3D. Then I define the data coordinates, different data coordinates. Here I use the plot function 3 times to plot multiple lines with different data coordinates, and then I use the title function to add a title, and I also use the ligand function to add ligand on a plot. That why I define a label inside the plot function, and in last I call the show function to display the plot. Now I execute the program, and here is the output. Now we will move to next topic, that is plot multiple lines with same color. In Matplotlib you can specify the color of the line in the chart. For this you have to specify the value of the color parameter in the plot function. So here we want to plot multiple line with same color, so we use the same color in all the parameters. So let's see an example. Here firstly I import the Matplotlib pyplot library. for data visualization and NumPy library for defining the data coordinates. Next, I define x and y data coordinates by using the random rendered function and set its lower highest value and the size. Next, to plot multiple line, I use plot function, and here I specify the color of the lines by using the hexacode of color. Here I use the same hexacode for both the color parameters in two different lines because we want to show multiple lines with the same color. I also add legend to the plot, and in last I call the show function to display the plot. Now I execute this code, and here you see that the line 1 and line 2 are of same color. Now we will move to the next topic, that is plot multiple lines with title. In Matplotlib, we will add title to a line chart by using the two different ways. First way is we can add a single title, or we can say the main title on the plot by using the subtitle function of a pyplot module, or the next way is to add a different title on each plot if we are using a subplot function by using the title function of the pyplot module. So let's see an example. So in this, firstly we import the Matplotlib pyplot library and NumPy library. Then I define different data coordinates by using a line space function, power function and exponent function. And I plot three different lines by using a plot function of pyplot module, and I specify different colors for each line. Then to add a title, I call a title function to add a title and also set title font to a bold. And then in last I call the show function to display the plot. Now I execute this code, and here is the output. Now we move to the next topic, that is plot multiple lines in the subplot. So to create a subplot, we use the subplot function, and the subplot function requires main three arguments, and these three arguments denote row, column and the index. Now let's see an example. Firstly, I import the Matplotlib and NumPy library. Then I set the figure size by using the fixed size parameter in figure method. Then I create a subplot with by using a subplot function. Then I define the data coordinate of subplot 1 by using a random rendered function, and then I plot multiple lines in it by using a plot function. Then I create a second subplot by using a subplot function. Then I define data coordinate, and next I once again calls the plot function to plot multiple line, and in last I call the show function. Now I execute this program, and here's the output. Now we will move to the next topic, that is plot multiple lines with different length. In Matplotlib we can plot multiple lines with different length also. So let's see an example. So I explain it. Firstly I import the Matplotlib and NumPy library. Then I define the data coordinate by using the array function of a NumPy. Then I call two-time plot function to plot multiple lines, and then last I call the show function to display the plot. And here I specify the data coordinates are of different lengths. Now I execute this code, and here is the output. From output you clearly see that the lines are of the different length. Now we will move to next topic, that is plot multiple lines using Seaborn. In Matplotlib you can draw multiple line using a Seaborn library and by using the line plot function of a Seaborn library. Let's see an example. Firstly, I import the necessary libraries like Matplotlib, PyPlot, NumPy and Seaborn. Next, I set the style of the plot by using the set style method of a Seaborn and set it to the dark grid, and then I define the data coordinates for plotting. Then I use the line plot function of the Seaborn library to plot multiple lines. That's why I call the line plot function two times. Then I call the show function to display the plot, and now I execute this code, and here is the output. Now we will move to the last topic, that is plot multiple lines from CSV file. In Matplotlib we can plot multiple lines by fetching data from the CSV file. So let's see an example. Firstly, I import the necessary libraries such as pandas and matplotlib. Then I use the read CSV function to read the file, and then I print this file. So now I execute this program and here is the output. So let's move to the next part. Here I convert this file to the data frame, pandas data frame, by using the data frame method, and now I print it. Now I execute this part of the code also, and here you see the data frame. Now we move to the next part. Here I use the ilog function to initialize the list to select the rows and the column by position from pandas data frame. Now I execute this part also. Now move to the plotting part. Here I set the figure size by using the fixed size method of figure function, and then I call the plot function 2 times to plot multiple lines. Here I also pass the marker as a parameter to set the marker, and in the last I call the show function. Now I execute this and here is the output. And with this, we complete our today's agenda. How to plot a best fit line in Matplotlib, and following are the topics that we are going to discuss. So firstly, we will understand what is best fit line. Then we will learn how to plot a best fit line in a Matplotlib with an example. And after that, we will see how we use the polyfit function of the NumPy library to plot a best fit line in Matplotlib. So let's begin the topic by understanding what is best fit line. So best fit line in a two-dimensional graph refer to a line that defines the optimal relationship of a x-axis and the y-axis coordinate of a data point plotted as a scatter plot on the graph. So now the question arises, how best fit line achieved? So the best fit line or an optimal relationship can be achieved by minimizing the distance of the data point from the proposed line. So now we will discuss how we represent the linear equation mathematically. So here I write the equation a into x plus b into y plus c equals to 0. Here x and y are the variable that represent the x-axis and the y-axis value of the data point. A and b are the coefficient of the variable x and y, and c is the constant. So collectively these parameters of a line decide which line shape and the position of the graph is plotted. But you all know that most commonly we use the intercept slope form of the line, and equation for this is y equals to m into x plus c, where x and y are the variable that represent the data point, and m is the coefficient of the variable x which represent the slope of the line. Here the slope is the parameter of the line that decides the angle of the line on the graph, and the c is the constant value that represent the y-intercept of the line on the graph, where the intercept is the parameter of the line that decides the position of the line on the graph. So now we will compare the above mathematical line equation with the slope intercept form of the line, and we get final result as m equals to minus a by b and c equals to minus c by b, and we will use this slope intercept form of the line through this post, and we will use the least square method in the regression analysis to plot the best fit line. So in this graph you can see that we have some scattered dots, and in between it we have a red color of a line. This red color of the line is known as a best fit line. So now we will move ahead and learn what is best fit line in Matplotlib and how we plot it. So we can plot a line that best fit to the scatter plot data points in Matplotlib, and we need to find out the parameter of the lines that make it best fit. So to do this thing, we will apply a vectorization concept of a linear algebra, And for this, firstly you have to understand the algorithm that we will be used for finding the parameters. So firstly I will explain you the algorithm. So here you can see that I write the equation as a y equals to m into x plus c. So now we have to change it as a y equals to theta 0 plus theta 1 into x. Here the theta 0 and theta 1 are the parameter representing the c. What is c? As we have discussed back, c is the intercept, and m also, where m is a slope respectively of the line. So here the theta 0 is the intercept and theta 1 is a slope. Now we have to change this equation to a vector form, as we are going to use the vectorization concept of the linear algebra. So now we have to change this equation to a vector form. So the detailed description of this is given in our blog post. You can see it here. I will show you. After converting it to a vector form, we will get the final equation as a y equals to x into theta. And now we calculate and get the optimal parameter values, which is theta 0 and theta 1 for the given data point, using the least square method equation in a vector form. So it will become as a theta a equals to xt x par t dot x and the whole power of a minus 1, then into x par t into y. Here xt is the transpose of the matrix x, and xt into x whole power to minus 1 is the inverse of the resulted matrix for the x par t into x. You have studied all these concepts in mathematics, what is matrix and how we transport it and how we will get the inverse of the matrix. So now we will see an example in the Matplotlib to plot a best fit line. So here is the example. I will explain you. Firstly, you have to import the necessary libraries. So as we are working with Matplotlib, we have to import the Matplotlib, and for plotting it we have to import the pyplot module also, and we alias it as a plt. Then I import the numpy library as np. After that I prepare the data for computing and plotting, and for this I use the array method of the numpy and I assign dt variable to it, and here I define an array. Then I prepare x and y data point from the above given data. So here the small x is represented as dt, and we use a slicing concept here which ends with 0, and then we will use the reshape function with this. So you all know that the reshape function is used to shape the array without changing the data of the array. So then I use the shape function, and after that I move ahead. Then I define the capital X by using the append function. I append the small x value with the numpy dot ones function. So numpy dot one function return a new array of a given shape and a data type where the element value is set to 1 only, and then I again use the shape function and I set its axis to 1. Then for the y, I again use the slicing concept and use the reshape function with the shape method. After that I move ahead and then I calculate the parameter using the least square method. So here I define a variable named theta and I use the numpy function linear algebra inverse. So we will write a linear algebra as linalg, and for inverse we will write inv. Basically this function is used to calculate the inverse of the matrix. So here I pass capital X into t into dot of x. So here you all know that here dot is the multiplication of the matrix. So this dot function basically multiplies each value from one data frame with the values from another data frame or series or array and adds it to together. So we are using the concept of array. So it will multiply each value of one array with the value of another array. Basically it is doing the multiplication of the two arrays, and then we will again use the dot function with x into t and then the dot function with y. After that we print the parameter of the line theta. Now we will move ahead and calculate the y-axis value against the x-axis value. So for this I create a variable with the name y underscore line, and here I set it to x into dot of a theta. Then to plot a best fit line, I call the scatter function, as I want to plot a scatter graph between x and y. Then for plotting a line which is a best fit line, I call the plot function and I set its x value as a x, y value as a y underscore line, and r as a color. Here the r represents the shorthand notation for the red color. So the best fit line is shown in the red color. Then I call the title function to add a title on the plot which shows that this plot represents the best fit line using the regression method. Then I add the x label and the y label function to add the labels at the x-axis and the y-axis, and last I call the show function to display the plot. Now I execute this cell and show you the output. So here you see that the parameter of the line is 0.9800690 and 0.01690,418. So it is represented from here, and this is the graph having a best fit line. These are the scatter plots which are shown as a circle form with a blue color, and this red color of the line is the best fit line of these data points. This is the x-axis and this is the y-axis of the plot. Now we will move ahead and learn to plot a best fit line using the ployfit function of the numpy. So here is the syntax: numpy dot ployfit, and you have to pass x and y and the degree. Now I will show you the example for it. So here firstly you have to import the necessary libraries. I again import the Matplotlib and the numpy library. Then I define the data for computed and plotted the plot. So here I use the array function of the numpy library and I create an array. Then I define the capital X and the small y from the given data, and here I use the slicing concept. After that, for calculating the parameter such as intercept and the slope, so I use the ployfit function of the numpy. Here I assign a variable theta to it. I call the ployfit function, pass capital X to it, small y to it, and then 1. So these three are the three arguments where the x coordinate value is firstly taken, then we have to define the y coordinate value, and last we have to define the degree. So you can define degree as a 1, 2, 3, where 1 represent the linear, 2 represent the quadratic, and 3 represent the cubic, and so on. So I want to plot a simple line, so I set its degree to 1, which is a linear. Then I print the parameter of the line by using the print function and passing theta to it. Then for calculating the y-axis against the x-axis value, here I create a y underscore line variable. Then I want to plot the best fit line. For this I create a scatter plot first between capital X and the y data coordinate. Then to plot a best fit line I call the plot function, as plot function is used for plotting a line. So I plot a best fit line between capital X and the y underscore line data points, and this line is shown with the red color as I have passed the shorthand notation r, which represent the red as a color. Then I add a title to the plot. Then I call the x label and the y label function for adding the labels at the x-axis, and last I call the show function to display the plot. Now I execute this cell and show you the output. Here you can see that it prints the parameter with the help of the print function. It shows the title with the help of the title function as a best fit line using the numpy ployfit function. It shows this is the y-axis and this is the x-axis. So here it is a scatter plot with the best fit line. So these are the scatter markers which are shown as a circle, and the red color lines represent the best fit line between capital X and the y underscore line data variable. So with this we have learned how to plot a best fit line in Matplotlib. And if this video was helpful, click on the like button. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel for more videos like this one. Thanking you for watching and have a nice day.